Welcome to the Syndicate X Library. Our guest today, Kelsey Grammer, and he is here to discuss a book that changed his life, Karen, A Brother Remembers. Tell me about your visit to the medium. Is it Esther?
Mm-hmm. A couple of folks from this one little group that we've spent some time with suggested that I talk to Esther at one point. It was arranged, and we met on the phone. There was a sort of the sounds like bones scratching, a rattle. And I thought, okay, here we go. She said, oh, your sister's here. She wants you to tell her story. I think it was real. I think Karen came along and said, you need to do this now because it's still holding you back.
How difficult was it for you to do this? Did you give a piece of your soul?
Books. They've saved us from the dark, set our souls on fire, and whispered truths we couldn't ignore. I'm Chris Collins, and this is Books That Changed My Life.
So I always saw my own life as an obligation to live it fully, that I owed her that because her life was taken.
Okay, big question. How did Karen change your life? We've met once before.
I thought so, and I was trying to remember why or how and where.
Do you remember Virgin America?
Yeah, of course.
It was the best.
Yeah.
It was so sad.
Fantastic.
But flying from New York to LA,
Right.
and you were really busy writing.
Uh-huh.
I didn't bother you. But at some point, I had to comment that you have the most beautiful penmanship
Oh, thank
I
you.
have ever seen.
Yeah,
And you've
Miss
heard that
Rizzuto,
before.
Yeah, right. Miss Rizzuto,
But
third
you
grade.
were writing something. I don't know what you were writing, but you were intently at work.
Oh, you know what? I think I was writing my graduation speech for UMass Amherst. I think that's what I was.
It was beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
I'm sure people comment on your penmanship, but there's a perfection to it.
Thank you.
that-
Yeah, no, I used to take it pretty seriously. Miss Rizzuto, third grade, that was important. She just made it seem important, and so I did it as best I could. And it stayed with me for a long time. I've been shocked with the lack of cursive instruction in our current education
Oh, it's
system.
gone.
It's like, how can you not have that in your quiver? I mean, you got to be able to write a note, and have it charm people. And
Well, even math, like we used to have to do math the long way. Nobody knows how to do. If they don't have a phone, they're dead in the water.
That's true. Although my daughter, my 12-year-old, is she's pretty good at it. I don't know how. We homeschool the kids, so she's done really well. She's accelerated some, but I'll be watching her. We were doing some remote stuff actually in Florida a while ago, and the kids were on their lessons, and I overheard Faith just going off. Yeah, it's negative seeds, and she's just like 3. There's a little pause. The teacher says, "Would you do that again?" She runs through it again. That is correct. Okay, pretty impressive. I can't do it.
That's fun. What do you think of the library?
Fantastic.
I'm gonna.
If I could, I would.
One of my favorite books in the library, The Wisdom of Kamala Harris. Check this out.
It's empty, right?
Yeah.
I knew it was coming.
And then the beautiful poetry. Just for equal.
That's really funny. Yeah, somebody did this to me slowly.
The best
hair
part
dries.
is that picture.
That's great.
They must have done it with AI or something.
That's terrific. Yeah, of course. I love my kids too for the same reason. They'll say, "Oh, that's AI," and I think I have no clue. But
It's hard to tell.
they're already trained to just doubt what they're being told, which I like. I I always think stand up against what you're being fed.
Yeah,
It's really cool.
Think for yourself.
Yeah.
It's good. Welcome to the Syndicate X Library. Our guest today, Kelsey Grammer, needs no introduction, but here are a few things you might not know about him. He found God on a surfboard, raised a motorcycle riding dog named Goose, the proud co-inventor of the Oreo dipped in a Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And he is here to discuss a book that changed his life, Karen, a brother remembers. What did you order? Latte?
Oh, latte. This is a half calf breve latte because I don't like to get too shaky, so I just do half calf. But I like the half and half.
Cheers.
Hey, cheers.
So
my friend.
I'm a Northwest guy, so coffee is important.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a guy up there. The coffee is called Vivace,
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
and he takes it pretty seriously. You can tell he cares.
That's good.
What he's making.
And I take it fairly seriously myself, so I travel around the country, and I'm often on trips, and I can't really find good coffee.
I take it with me.
Do you really? Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of the companies like Canyon, they make those instant packets that are good. Like they'll save you in a pinch.
Okay.
And Verve
Okay, good.
too.
No kidding. Okay.
I don't know how they do. I know when I was younger, the instant stuff was terrible.
Yeah.
Well, they've figured out a better way. It's pretty good.
Cool.
So I'll
So I'll
just need hot
consider it.
water.
Thank you.
Yeah, because it can be bleak.
Oh yeah, no, it's sad.
Especially-
After a while, I kind of quit coffee, and I think I shouldn't be doing that.
How long did it take you to write this?
Took me about 3 years.
What is your system for writing? Like, did you dedicate so many hours?
I meant to do that, but what I would find is because this is really my first venture into real writing. I mean, I had done a book previously called So Far that was ghost written basically, and I didn't like it when I read it. I insisted that they not publish it. I said, "Well, you owe us a book in 2 weeks." So I said, "Okay, I'm not letting you release this one." So they sent a girl out, an editor named Audrey LaFair, who's a very lovely person, wonderful, smart, and dedicated. So in 2 weeks, basically, I dictated what I thought it should be like. But we had the outline of the book already that had been done by somebody else. So it was sort of like filling in the blanks. I didn't really care for it. When I decided to write this one, 30 years hence, it was an extraordinary experience. I tried to dedicate a certain amount of time to it, but when I would go down a certain passage, it would just take me with it. It really was stream of consciousness, which I used to find kind of offensive as a style of writing until I started writing it. Yeah, right. And it was the only way I could do it. It was like it was like being in sort of a time capsule, like I was in the moment that I was experiencing, no matter where I was or how many years removed. That was the moment that existed in that time. And so the book has a kind of haphazardness about tenses.
Yeah.
And what tense we're in at this.
There's no chapters.
Time. Yeah, no chapters. I say I experiment with chapters for twice, between then, and I think I'm gonna forget. I don't need them.
And you kind of come in and out a little bit too.
Yeah.
Like
well,
you break
what I mean, if you
break
know
the
it,
fourth wall.
Oh, break the fourth wall. It was the Henry Fielding thing, Tom Jones. When I read that book, I was 18 years old. I was riding on the subway all the time, and I remember laughing out loud, like sitting there going. I found him so charming and sort of mischievous, in the way he went about just saying, "Oh, and by the way, you are reading the greatest novel ever written." I thought, son of a man, I want to borrow that. No, I didn't get so silly as to say that in the book, but I did say, I'm borrowing this style a little bit from Henry to step into the book and take people either closer to something or take them away a little bit or ease them down, hold their hand for a second. So there's interjections in there. There's a letter to the reader, thank you for being with me so far. Stick around if you want to. I understand if you don't, that's okay. There's going to be some stuff ahead, but I'll be here for you, and you're there for me. And that was a great device, but for me, it was a personal outreach. It was just a connective thing.
Yeah, it's very kind.
Yeah.
Well, so when you were writing it, did you write it
No, it was all computer.
computer, so like on a Mac?
Yep.
Into Word or?
Into Word.
And
Of
so
course, I
when
got terrified a couple of times. I thought I lost the whole thing a few times. I went, holy shit.
You didn't back it up twice?
I did.
You did after a while?
Finally learned that. I did that about 3 times in the first 50 pages, and I went, where is it?
So what's the longest you went in a stream of consciousness?
The longest single night I went was when I was talking about Alabama in the book. I was in Alabama. I was shooting a film, and there had been a really violent thunderstorm, tornado warnings. So they had us, kind of hunkered down for a bit, and then we just all went to the bar and had a cocktail. And then when I got back, the tornadoes passed, and it was almost just like the day that I was riding my motorcycle for the first time further west than I'd ever been, and it was in Alabama when I got struck by lightning, and that that night, I think I wrote for 16 hours.
Oh,
Straight.
wow.
The whole experience really was like channeling. And then I'd review it. Sometimes I'd correct myself in like midstream. I'd edit it a little bit just as I was going. But then I started to think maybe that was foolish. I should actually give it a little time to sort of settle into where I wanted it to be or where I'd wanted to be, and then go back and say, oh no, I need to lift that out. There were several pages deleted because there were a couple of times I thought I kind of broke through the fourth wall a little too much and made it too individually personal. Like my anger, a couple of times I thought that isn't useful for the book right now. So I would expunge that in an edit later on, pick a word out that I thought, well, that's a little confusing. When I read the book aloud, recorded the book, I started to think, that sort of chemistry between a reader and the written word is being abrupted by my interpretation. Now, this does not mean I want people not to hear the recorded version, but I think the greater experience is in just the reading of it, because then you get to have a sort of personal moment with the word itself. There are certain things that would come up to me, an apology, an explanation, a digression. I would use words like that quite a bit to just mark, I'm changing course here a little bit. And that was when I got into the idea about waypoints and what I remember about navigation and maritime laws and stuff. I started to think, well, waypoints, show you where you've been, where you're going. And I thought I needed to repeat them sometimes. And those were just like markers for somebody to say, oh yeah, we've been here. What's different about this that he's writing now? And then we could take a little trip together. But I realized that the written word will give you any brain that has experience itself, and of course it has, they all do, it'll give you 7 or 8 possible interpretations in the moment you read it. And I started to think that my spoken interpretation kind of narrowed the ability of the book to reach people.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is funny how those dimensions come
Yeah.
to play.
And I get the value of wanting to hear me read it. So a lot of people say, well, I wouldn't want to read it without hearing you read it. Oh, well, do both.
Well, you can see my thoughts on
Right.
books versus spoken word. But sometimes an audible book can be pretty fun.
Yeah.
So when you were writing it, do you have like a ritual? Did you drink coffee? Was there any sort of
All
things
sorts of different times. Sometimes I'd have a martini. It was in the afternoon, late afternoon, coffee in the morning.
So just depend on the time of
Oatmeal,
day.
kids waking up. It's like the traffic in my house is pretty thick, and there's no real respect for Dad's writing. It doesn't happen. So it'd be like, Dad, what are you doing? You writing? My son did an impression the other day. Gabriel. He said, Dad, I want to show you my impression of you. So he went over to my computer, right? Laptop, he flipped it up, and he started going like this. He's a rascal.
What a character.
Yeah, he's really funny. I said, you got it. Yeah, you did it.
What sort of art inspires you?
Boy, almost all kinds. I mean, I love... I was the guy that always thought, let's go down to the village and see some performance art, see somebody dancing around naked or somebody with a clarinet singing or whatever they were doing. I love live performance. I think that's great. Avant-garde stuff, Impressionism, the Hudson River School. These guys all connect with me. The American wing of the Metropolitan, when they redid it, like in '74, something like that. And I used to walk there when I went to school. I'd walk across the park and just go in because I was a student. I didn't have to pay anything. And I would spend hours there. But that American wing was really something. That's the one that has George Washington doing the thing with the boat and all that. But there's a couple of the guys at Hudson River School guys, a guy with his hunting dog, and you can barely see them, and you see that they're sort of walking up a muddy trail on the side of a hill. Just great stuff. A sort of documentary paintings of a life I don't know,
Yeah, a time too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Do you have an art collection, or do you have any pieces that you love?
I have a few things that are pretty cool. There's a strange period called German Romanticism, which is pretty much about 1827 to 1834. It's like, it's a
Right
pretty narrow
before-
window,
Things were a
But,
little happier.
Yeah. There's only really a couple of artists from there, and I have something that's pretty remarkable. It's of the St. Mark's column in Venice, and the moon is setting at the top of it with the griffin like on top of it, but all around it are Friedrich Nerli is his name, but Caspar David Friedrich is the most famous painter from that particular time. But these two guys painted at the same time, and there's a monk curled up at the base of the column smoking a pipe, and you can still see the smoke. So it's a great piece because it's barely been touched. There's no like sense of history in it. It's from 1830, and it's framed in the original frame. And they said there's a rumor that may have hung in the Russian museum before the Tsar was overthrown. The topic is it's an invitation to Christian meditation.
Oh, wow.
It's really fascinating. And there's something about it. It just pulls you in mystically. It really does.
Do you have it in a place where you can sit and
it's a
stare
place
at
of
it?
value, yeah.
And do you often?
I'll just disappear in it, yeah.
Wow.
People often come to the house, and there's some pretty nice pieces of art around, but that's the one that usually resonates with
it
people who
big?
come back. Yeah, it's about 4 feet by 2.5. About like that, yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful piece. And yeah, people come up once in a while and say, oh my God, I saw that painting. It's probably the best one I got.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about your visit to the medium. Is it Esther?
Mm-hmm. She's a Brazilian gal. I've met a couple of folks. We've been doing this sort of plant medicine journey people group around lately in Southern California. It's been a couple of years.
Everybody's got a shaman.
Yeah, right.
The pastor's been replaced with, I got to
Exactly.
introduce you to my shaman.
It was so
You're
funny.
like,
I'll do a
okay.
digression on that in a minute. But a couple of folks from this one little group that we've spent some time with suggested that I talk to Esther at one point. And so it was arranged, and we met on the phone. And she said, well, just relax. Just relax. She has a bit of a thick accent, and she lives in London. She got on the phone, and then there was a sort of, the sounds of like bones scratching and a rattle. And I thought, okay, here we go. And somewhere after she started saying, do you feel like, she said, oh, your sister's here. She wants you to write. No, she said, she wants you to tell her story. I thought, that's interesting. Because maybe she knew about my sister, but no one had ever told me that she wants me to tell her story. And I think it was real. I think Karen came along and said, you need to do this now because it's still holding you back. I think that was the whole reason for it. And to celebrate her and to remember her. She knows what I think about the word remember. I mean, I talk about it in the book, but to remember someone means to take someone who's no longer part of your group and reintroduce them to it so that they're remembered, a member of the group. And Karen is finally membered among my friends now, and membered among people I know and love. And what was remarkable, the very first person I gave a rough draft to came back in a week or two and said, I actually got to know your sister. That's really something. That was
the intention.
That was what I wanted, yeah.
Yeah.
That was cool.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks, man.
How do you think that works? The medium.
I don't know. But I've been involved in it for years. I've worked with people who study it. I produced a show called Medium for several years. Some are good, some are kind of shaky. But I do think, and it was described to me this way, is that it's meant to be a gift from God, basically. That's a healing gift. You can't get past a certain sudden loss of communication, or you're really longing to be with someone that you miss. There are those who are gifted in this particular place who are meant to help heal you. And of course, it's a dangerous area. I agree with a lot of my sort of more fundamentalist pals in Christianity who say, well, going in there, maybe not a great idea because you're vulnerable. And I get that, but there are some who are really good. And I still think it serves that purpose. There is a lot of swirling mischief around it.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up a pastor's kid and a missionary's kid.
did you realize?
And it would, none of that.
Yeah,
would
no,
fly.
they were against
like
it.
my mom was ready to disown me when I did TM. And I kept telling her, like, it's not a religion.
Just a chant, Mom.
Yeah, it's just
It's just
meditation. No, it's the devil. Like,
Well, it
you know.
is pretty interesting, that whole thing. But I always say to them, well, you know, what is revelation but channeling? I mean, in the
Yeah.
Bible, you know, it's like
Plenty.
John sitting there in a
Prophecy.
cave, and
Yeah.
who's that dropping by? Jesus Christ. You know, it's like, okay, I get it, but it seems like channeling to me. So
Yeah.
you know,
I never thought of it that way, but that's true.
Yeah.
How difficult, before we get into this, so I'm gonna read parts of this, but how difficult was it for you to do this? Did you give a piece of your soul?
Yeah. Sometimes it was really hard. The way the book's written is I've talked about everything I was bumping into. I went to sleep. I don't know how to go this next route. Don't know where I'm headed. Something came to me last night in a dream about hammer it out. You know, the Richard II speech. So the idea was to always kind of just be open, honest, and if I was having trouble, I'd talk about that too. You know, I hit a block. Don't know how to go down this road. This is painful. And here's a little amusing, anecdote about, my obsession with some teenage girl. I mean, there was all sorts of stuff that happened that I would laugh about and sort of celebrate again, because when Karen and I were together, we were just a couple of innocent kids who loved each other, and we were lucky. Asked her in another session I had with her, I described her, I said, I was just writing about Karen, and I said, and I realized she was the love of my life. And she said, yes. And how wonderful that you were born into the same family. You didn't have to spend a lifetime looking for each other. Boy, that's probably true. I mean, a year and a half apart, she came and brought joy to a young boy who was pretty hurt. My dad wasn't around. Thankfully, my grandparents were, and my mom took me to her home where my granddad raised me. I think there was some kind of a wound there, a sense that my dad didn't want me, and so there was a kind of sadness, a melancholy about this little boy. And when his sister came, that was like her gift to him, was to bring him joy. So I wanted to pay her back.
Are there behavioral cascades from that you apply to your kids?
Well, that's an interesting word, cascade. That's not bad. I mean, I call it projection too sometimes, because what happens is I don't want my children to suffer what I did, but I guess that's what all parents go through. They look at their kids and think, oh gosh, the stuff you're going to go through. I hope something I teach you along the way will make it a little easier. I used to say to my oldest child, honey, you don't have to learn everything by experience. Once in a while, try to learn it by example, but didn't work out so well.
Yeah, but the contradiction there is you turned out pretty good.
Yeah, right.
And
so why should I be afraid of that, right?
Yeah.
Just that pain that I've known, and I think, yeah, I got through it, but I could have done without it.
Right.
And I'd like to, maybe they can live a life that skips a little of it. Maybe not.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
Because especially like all of those hardships are what made you who you are.
Yeah.
And then in a sense, we try to protect people from that.
Am I robbing them of life? Honestly. Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I think one part of this that is a through line in the book is forgiveness. What are your thoughts on, because it's a heavy, big mountain to climb.
Yeah. I did think that some of the intention behind this message I got was to help me with that, was to finally put it to bed a little bit. The lack of forgiveness that I would sort of visit upon myself was kind of brutal sometimes. I hung on to it for a long time. The book helped me to slowly release it. The forgive yourself idea that comes in, that Karen mentions several times in the book. And I know I talk about it as though she's an actual character and speaking, and she was. So, okay, that's how it goes. I was admonished to forgive myself as often as I could. As often as it would come up, it would just be, and remember, you need to forgive yourself. I took a lot of this on myself because for whatever reasons, I was a big brother. I always protected her. And that was slammed shut, on that one night. In that moment, everything I knew changed, and everything I thought I was challenged, and there was nothing I could do about it until I wrote this book.
I mean, forgiveness is an interesting thing, especially in the world we live in today,
Yeah.
where I don't know, it's kind of beyond that in a way. So I got this tabbed here. So I'm
And
gonna
thanks for reading it.
so I'm gonna read this, and then I'm gonna kind of ask you your thoughts. So, and I like the idea that after death, a soul can still manifest itself in some form or other, making itself known on this plane. I like these ideas, but I have no tangible knowledge that they are true. What do you think happens when we die?
Well, like I said, I have no knowledge that they're true. I just have experience that I believe is true. So I like the idea that someone can reach out and reach across the veil, through the veil, and give us information. I think channeling does exist. I really do believe in that. I think, I've been told in the past that, the aqueducts were channeled information to the Egyptians when there was a great drought, things like that. I believe that's true. I believe that sort of, you remember the Castaneda books, Que Bueno, and how the world conspires to inform your choices. They're wonderful books. Was it The Adventures of Don Juan and Ixtlan? I think. Anyway, the idea that we are in this dance on several planes and they actually will have a way of crossing into your existence once in a while, especially when you need it, I think that happens. I can't prove it, so I wanted to offer up, if not an apology, yeah, an apology is like an explanation. So a bit of an apology about where my head is on this stuff. I do believe it's true. I do believe that I've had messages, true messages from the other side in my lifetime.
Do you believe that there's a heaven and a hell?
Yeah. I believe it more now than I used to. I used to think, you kind of, I don't know, that's all bull. The way the world is set up and the way good and evil seem to stand really in opposition to one another all the time, and yet sometimes it's hard to discern which is which. I think there's somebody playing a really interesting game, and it's bigger than us. And it may be heaven and hell, maybe God and the other guy, and there's all kinds of stuff that I think that feels to me like it's more true now than it used to.
Have you ever heard the theory that the other guy is actually the one in charge?
I have, on this plane, certainly.
Yeah.
I believe that quite a bit.
You do?
Yeah, because warfare is not God's invention, it's Satan's. So
That would make more sense, because if your concept of God is love, then that would make
and free will
sense.
Yeah. The other guy wants you to go down the road and do exactly what you're told.
When I was a kid, I used to pray. So I also, like you, was raised by my grandfather. So my dad wasn't in my life, and I used to pray that my grandfather would be saved when I was a little kid. And then I don't know, maybe the older I got, the less enchanted with that idea I was. But when he died, I always wanted him to be proud of me. And I remember he was dying of cancer, and he came down to visit me here in California. I was a big shot, I had a big job, and and what was interesting is, like, none of my successes resonated with him. He didn't care. I remember he sat in my office and he was like, what time do you get in here? Like, he wanted me to show up on time and work hard.
Right.
Like, that's all he cared about. Like, he was a fireman and came out of the Depression, was in the Navy.
Of course, my granddad too.
But it was all like, do you show up early? Are you working hard? That sort of thing. And when he died, I had this, really talented guy that worked for me, and I was upset, and I was just thinking, did he go to heaven, whatever. And he wrote me this, beautiful note saying that someday I'll see my grandpa again and I can pull him up into heaven. I called him in my office. I was like, it's not the way that I understand it. But he was Mormon.
Oh, really?
And the Mormons believe that you can pull people up. And I thought that was fascinating. I was like, I don't know. I mean, there's also purgatory with Catholic. There's a bunch of different ideas of it, all fascinating. And I mean, really, sitting here, we don't know for sure.
No.
We just know what we believe in.
Does it look like Michelangelo's? I don't know. It's a nice picture, though. Yeah.
Okay. You wrote, we suffer mostly at our own hand and perception, or at least I do, and I am sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I create my I create certain scenarios and certain interpretations of things that take me to pain. That I end up sort of harpooning myself by insisting that I keep a certain image front and center when I needn't. Some of it had to do with that's fairly early on in the book when I'm processing the idea that I'm supposed to get rid of a lot of this guilt that I have and try to forgive myself. And it sort of leads toward that, yeah.
Is there a shortcut to that, or does it just take time and work?
I think it just takes the time. I think you got to put in the hours and do the work. I guess if you believe in the idea that Jesus has died for your sins, you can, if you believe in it, shortcut it.
Yeah.
But that's by virtue of he volunteers that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too, because in a sense he's taking on all the responsibility, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. It was one of those radio things. I think I write about it in the book as well. There's a section. I was listening to one of the fundamentalist preachers. It wasn't Greg Laurie. It was one of the other guys, but I know Greg because I did the Jesus Revolution film, and he said, "Take my yoke upon thee," right? And I thought that always meant to me in my mind that expression always meant, carry Jesus, carry his pain, carry it for him. And then this guy was explaining, this preacher in his sermon was explaining, he said, it means I've got it. It's my yoke. You come in here, I'll carry this. We'll plow the field together, but I'll do the pulling. Instead of a person having to. Jesus will do it for you. And I'd never really thought of it that way until then. And I thought, take my yoke upon thee, and I thought, okay, yeah, I can see how that might help.
If he died on the cross and he could call down the angels, or he could call it off, right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't, then he's accepting a burden that should take care of a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, here's kind of, we're touching on the forgiveness a little, but you wrote, sad because how we deal with events beyond our control never steals our right to deal with them as we choose, to rise above them and endure in spite of them. To me, one thing that I talk a lot about, and I teach in the leadership stuff that I do, is this idea of locus of control, that you have an internal locus of control, which means you accept responsibility, versus an external where you're blaming the government, your parents, God. People that externalize control end up being pretty helpless and miserable, but it's like 90% of the population that are waiting for the government, or they're waiting to win the lottery, that sort of thing. To me, you're kind of touching on that in a sense of there is personal agency.
Oh no, absolutely. A lot of that section is based upon the idea that I think no matter what happens, you do not have to surrender. You do not have to surrender to thinking it's somebody else's fault, or that you're a victim to the point where you can't keep going. I always saw my own life, especially since Karen was killed, as an obligation to live it fully. That I owed her that because her life was taken. So I guess that's part of it.
Did you develop more personal agency because of that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, I've always been pretty much of a, I'm fairly conservative, but I'm definitely not a big government guy. I don't expect the government to help me at all. I'd prefer them to get out of my way most of the time.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But there is this thing that happens, and has happened more and more, is the more you get the population to externalize control, and the more they're gambling, trying to get rich, the more it's the government, the more you're blaming one side or the other side, the easier it is to control them.
Absolutely.
And so it's easier to control the population.
I think all this stuff about nobody knows who they are anymore. This is all kind of, working away at that. As long as you don't know who you are, we can control you. Somebody else is in charge, because I don't have a clue about what I am. So we'll tell you. Nothing wrong with you. But it being as perfectly normal as it can be, you have this situation going on, and I can give you some drugs for it.
Well, I can write you a prescription.
Yeah, it makes me think, it's, this is not your fault. This is bullshit.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So do you think if what happened to Karen wouldn't have happened, you wouldn't have developed that personal agency the same way?
I might not have thought it was as important, but I do think I would have anyway. Yeah,
Really?
I think that's kind of who I am. It's I would have loved to. I mean, and who knows? We might have thought about it if she'd lived. She might have had a different opinion. But I believe we both were really quite enamored of the idea of personal freedom, which also meant personal responsibility. It didn't mean, I get a free ride and somebody else is going to cover it. It means I make these choices and it's I'm on the line, and that's the way I still feel.
That really kind of resonated with me.
It means a lot to me that you read it. I've been doing some interviews lately where you go, well, I didn't read this.
They're just
Yeah. What made you think you wanted to do the book? I think, well, if you read it, you'd know.
yeah, this is a little longer tail conversation too. Those things are you're in and out.
Yeah.
Okay, Carl and his family were leaving town for a bit, and he offered me his place in trade for house sitting. It was a blessing, and they had a great stereo system. Yeah. And I played James Taylor till the grooves wore out. Grooves wore out meant something back then.
Yeah. Well, what's nice is it's starting to mean something again.
Yeah, you saw our
I saw
vinyl
your
collection.
stuff. Yeah, it's great, man. I'm just putting one in my house too. So,
Are you?
yeah, it's really fun.
What do you know what
Well,
you're
I've got
putting
an old Technics, and there's a fellow that's designing sound systems for recording studios now who says, I got to bring these speakers over, and they got all this drive stuff. So I've surrendered to it now.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's the price of a house in La Jolla.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, the power of prayer. So you wrote in here, now here's the catch. I always leave my keys with the vehicle. I do it to this day. Don't tell anyone. And then your motorcycle gets stolen.
I know it got stolen.
And then you said at the same time, she said she was going to ask her church to do a prayer circle to get my motorcycle back.
Uh-huh.
And so that Sunday, the fate of the bike was shared in church. And on Monday, the police called me and said that they thought they had my bike. It had turned up in Mexico, been painted flat black, and was seized in some sort of traffic stop by the Mexican authorities, identified and marked for return to San Diego, and its rightful owner, me. I was wondering, are there any other stories in your life that prayer... It was like the line was too straight.
That's the only one that really just was like, you got to be kidding. I mean, she looked at me and said, I'm going to ask a prayer circle to be done for your motorcycle. And it was 17 hours later.
How messed up was it?
It was not too bad because they'd been driving it.
Did you like the flat black?
No.
I mean, that's a style.
I repainted it. I learned how to paint enamel paint on my gas tank. So it's, some good comes of almost everything that happens, but they didn't mess with it. And I think I put a new chain on it at the time. That's all it was. I think it was getting kind of old anyway, it was getting a little bit too lax. So I did that, and I bought myself a big wide tire for the back of it. And that was a fun look. And I rode that bike for, another 40,000 miles. It's great.
Oh, this one is good. Auden wrote a great line I will paraphrase. At 14, gazing in the mirror, all we are not stares back at what we are. At 14, gazing in the mirror, all we are not stares back at what we are.
Yeah, it's an Auden line. It's from a book, sort of not an epic poem exactly, but just a longer form poem called "The Sea in the Mirror," and Caliban to the audience, if I remember rightly. There's a section where Caliban steps out of the play The Tempest. Sea in the mirror. There's all this stuff that comes together, but it's advice about figuring out who you are, and especially as an artist, what's your destination going to be? What is your destiny, if you even have one? What is the work you're about to do going to amount to? And you feel sometimes like you're an adolescent boy who's pockmarked and got acne and looking at it, and he's sitting in a room, and it just reminded me of my life. Sitting in a room wishing he was something he's not, and he looks in the mirror and sees all the things he's not. And it's a brilliant. it may be pretty closely quoted, not as loosely as I suggest, but I know I missed a word or two in there. But the emotion I didn't miss at all, and that was how I used to feel sometimes. Was what am I going to be? How am I going to stack up? How am I going to make it? What am I around these magnificent people? And I'm just a thing without any real identity or any real purpose. And those were torturous days. But that's probably adolescence, isn't it? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I always think back, and I'm by no means as successful as you are, but I always hear kids talk about anxiety, and I'm like, I had anxiety because nobody cared. I had to get to work.
Yeah.
Like
same thing. My little girl's got it now.
I was worried.
Yeah.
Like I didn't think things were like, I didn't see a path many times. Yeah. And the only way was through. I just had to work.
Yeah.
Like the one thing I knew is I could outwork everybody. Maybe I wasn't smarter.
Well, I love what
but I could work.
Your fireman.
My grandpa told me, he would say it over and over again. He would just say, son, if somebody pays, and this is how old I am, if somebody pays you $4 an hour and you give them $8 worth of value, you'll always be in demand. And that just was always in my head, like, good. Just give more value.
It's really good. I think the same way. Yeah. It's in the book. At some point I talk about my first union job as a construction worker. I lasted a day, when they came up to me and said, slow down. I'm not even sweating. And I thought, and then somebody said, and this is the one that nailed me. They said, they're not paying you to work this hard. What are they paying me for? To sit around and do nothing, So.
But it's that gravitational pull to average.
Yeah.
Like, don't beat the medium.
Don't be being,
don't be
standing out.
Yeah, we gotta.
So I just quit. They said they were going to beat my ass, so I said, okay, right. I'd rather leave.
This was amazing at your high school. L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah.
Alan Watts. What was it like to experience Alan Watts?
It was fantastic. These people were. This was the pinnacle of our current culture at the time. These guys showing up and talking about things, and it's like, I was like, wow. And I realized that I have a debt of great gratitude to that school for the insight they had to invite these people there. But L. Ron Hubbard was just a guy who had written a book called Dianetics. He wasn't like the leader of a church or a cult or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it hadn't gotten there. And I've always wondered about the dynamics of that. Is that because when he died, somebody decided these things are? How did it become what it is? Scientology. How did that happen? Of course, Kirstie Alley was a great friend of mine, and I never really was curious enough to look into it because I kind of had a sense of faith already, that was constructed. But I think he was coming up with stuff about, kind of like power of positive thinking, a little bit like Norman Vincent Peale, stuff I'd read before in my life. I thought, oh, that sounds a little like that. That resonates like that. Joseph Heller came and read from Catch-22. I mean, that was amazing.
It's incredible.
We're sitting there. The greatest writers in the world are walking in the door and just reading to us aloud. It was fantastic. Yeah, I was blessed. That school was a blessing.
Whenever I'm having a hard time sleeping, or sometimes if I wake up really early, there's this one Alan Watts recording called "The Joker" that I just love.
Yeah,
and I've probably listened to it 100 times. But it's like 3 hours, and it's so good. And he starts off talking about the court jester. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. That is
fantastic.
I mean, some of that had to get on you.
Yeah,
because
absolutely. I think so.
Some of that pixie dust.
We were real, 69, Summer of Love, 71, that kind of stuff. And I thought that was beautiful stuff. The people who ended up in charge that came from that generation, I don't know. They've lost their way.
Why do you think that is?
Power.
Yeah.
It's just seductive.
It is funny how power is such.
And comfort. And, suddenly you're walking around with a whole bunch of ideals, and then you got 5 or 6 houses you want to keep. You got this income stream coming from nowhere because you voted for, oh, yeah, we should have stuff made out of corn. Yeah, I'll get a kickback from that. And you get addicted to the money. I mean, I think it's an organized, government is sort of like organized crime in a lot of ways. I'm a big fan of small government for that reason. I mean, it just don't.
What do they call that libertarian?
Yeah, libertarianism. Yeah, I guess. But I'm fairly conservative too, though, because I think conserve, to conserve principles, to conserve the good things that you have on the planet, to conserve the relationships between men, women, and children, and to sort of aim at a tolerance for each other that's real. Live and let live. I mean, that's where I'm at.
I'm like the gaslighting drives me crazy because like if you just think about here in LA, the amount of money, like if you can't see that it's corrupt, and every time you ask them a question, they deflect.
Go somewhere else.
Like it's just common sense. Like I'm not attacking anybody. I'm not, but we don't need to talk about 3 bathrooms right now. We can talk about them, but let's just talk about the whatever 200 billion.
Yeah, right.
And
what's that?
Nothing's changed.
Why is that
like,
there?
It doesn't make sense.
No, it is really weird.
And you just feel gaslit.
It's greed, that's been transitioned into policy that's actually been allowed to fester. And of course, then there's this stagnation of thought. There's people sitting around going, yeah, we just sign it. It just goes out the door. And they don't want it to change, but it needs to. So
there's got to be some sort of right sizing on the ship.
Yeah, I think
we can't just keep lighting money on fire.
We're going to run out. Yeah, we're going to run out. Well, I'll tell you, one of my pet peeves, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, when you're sitting in traffic and you're just about to go, but your engine turns off because they've got that thing on it, that says, you're sitting too long, so it just shuts you down to your butt. And I think, who's the guy that said that was a good idea? Because it's like when I was growing up, if you started your car more than once or twice every 5 minutes or so, it was a waste of fuel. That's what I was taught. So I kept thinking, who's the genius that said, let's put this crap in our cars? So I got, a million of these things that I just eat away at me on a daily level. But somebody got money for it. That's what pisses me off. And I met Jesse Ventura several weeks ago, and we were talking about something. He said, the one thing I did when I was, governor of Minnesota, I said I won't meet one lobbyist. I thought that was a good idea.
I don't understand how lobbyists are allowed. What is it, like there's 4 lobbyists for every congressman? Something like that?
It's easily that. Recently, I went to the dedication of the World War I memorial, which took over 100 years to get made. And it's beautiful. It's Sabin Howard's this sculptor who did it. It's dynamic and expressive and beautiful. And so they dedicated it in right near the Washington Monument. As I'm walking across the street from the hotel I was staying in to go to the swearing, or the celebration of the monument, 3 people came up to me. Every one of them said, here's my card, I'm a lobbyist. Here's my card, I'm a lobbyist. What are you doing in town? Good to see you. And the third person finally did, and I thought, this is horrible. So I want that to change.
Yeah, it does. It's just a conflict. It doesn't line up.
It's just wrong-headed. Yeah, I mean, what are we doing? The streets of Washington, D.C., I mean, I first visited them when I was probably 1961 or 62 with my granddad. And I thought this is the most magnificent place I'd ever seen, because I really believed in government, and I believed that the United States was the best one there was. And it made my heart swell with pride that, people were so responsible and thoughtful. And of course, maybe that was a big con then too. But going back this last time, I thought, I don't want to be here. And that was tough.
Yeah, we could be so much better.
Yeah.
And
we got some great founding principles.
Yeah.
Somebody said, I'm quoting somebody else, but I've sort of grokked at myself. The notion that the Constitution doesn't need to be rewritten; it needs to be reread. I think that. We'd all get along pretty well if we could get to there.
Yeah, and I think too, just to realize that we have more in common than we do different. You don't have to join the cult.
No, you don't.
Like we could, if you sit with just about anybody. Like I always say with politics, like. Or even religion. People say don't talk politics or religion. I'm like, why? You could change my mind. Like I'm really curious what you know that I don't know. But what ends up happening is they don't know anything. They're just in a cult.
Right.
And so you can't really talk about it. You can't. If you start asking questions, people get offended, and then you're in trouble.
Yeah. I always say, well, they're playing with a full deck, but they're only using 3 cards.
My grandpa would say something.
Same one. Yeah, well, I got that for you. It's like a 10 of diamonds. Sorry, buddy. That's not going to win that trick.
My grandpa used to say the elevator doesn't go all the way to the top.
Yeah, right.
He also used to say, "I'll slap you naked and hide your clothes."
That's
I don't
great.
know why he just say that
That reminds
randomly.
me, I got to share this with you. This is funny. A buddy of mine who I went to school, college with, we communicated quite a bit during the lockdown, and it was kind of a rediscovery of an old friendship that we hadn't been active for a long time. So it was generating back up, and he sent over one little thing one day that said, "I'm going to ask my mom if she'd still like to keep that promise to slap me in the next year." And then the next one was murder hornets. We remember when they came out. So it's like, what the hell?
Okay, generational trauma.
Mm.
You wrote, it is important because I believe so much of what we are is baked in another cake, baked into us by the suffering or successes of our ancestors, and so much of what they experience is baked into our DNA. We inherit any number of emotions and hardships and histories from family that lived generations before us.
Yeah,
You think it's in our DNA?
I do. Yeah, I do think there's and I think we can break it. I think the idea of a curse, I don't necessarily allow that to resonate through me so much, but a sense of sort of DNA habit that is absorbed, and because I see the DNA molecule as the male female. I see it as divine masculine, but sacred masculine, divine feminine, and they wrap around each other and create our experience. This idea that something that happened to your generation, to your family, maybe 4 generations previous, is bound to have a profound effect on that recreation gene, that molecule, the DNA molecule, deoxyribonucleic acid. I went to the Vatican about 7 years ago and had a wonderful tour from a guy, an American kid from Ohio, who was a priest, who had been put in charge of restoring all the art in the Vatican. And I thought that is the coolest job any human being's ever had. And he had a tiny little office sitting up in one of what looks like a little minaret at the top of the church. But as we walked in, he greeted us. It had been arranged by a friend of ours who was Italian. And he said, "You're going to like Father Mark because he's an American kid." As we're walking, he said, "Oh, and over there are the double helix stairs." And he kept walking. I said, "That's interesting. The double helix stairs, when were those put in there?" He said, "Around 1100. So 800 years before they discovered the double helix DNA molecule in science, the model was in the Vatican." And I thought, well, there's something pretty extraordinary about what's going on. And if the DNA molecule was represented by a guy making a set of stairs 1,000 years before, then all this stuff is connected. And it seemed to me a very profound lesson in the idea that God or whomever, but I'm with God, it's okay, that God reveals as he wishes to. And we're either ready for the information or not, but it's always been there. My great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was a fellow named Thomas Cranmer, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury. He wrote the Book of Common Prayer for the Anglican Church for King Henry VIII. He was burned at the stake after Henry died. And it was a story I was told when I was a little boy that until about 3 weeks ago, it was always on my mind, just a little bit. And then I started talking about like all the premature young death in our family, and there's been a lot of it. And there may be others that have experienced it a lot, but I suddenly thought to myself, she handed me a piece of stone, this gal. She's sort of like a channeler, but it was just, we were sitting around talking about stones and stuff, and my wife and a couple friends. She handed me this stone, and I looked at it, and I thought to myself, well, that's his vision through the flames. And that moment had always disrupted me. And for the first time ever, I was seeing his vision of God through the flames, and that he was okay with it. And I was suddenly, it released a ton of stuff from me. It was fascinating. So I do believe we carry some of this stuff. My grandmother's great uncle died from an overdose. He was a dentist, and he used to practice the stuff they'd put people out with around the turn of the century, 1904, and it was pretty awful. It was pretty bad stuff they'd go ahead and OD on, but he did one night, and this was the same. This was the generation after all the people who crossed the country on foot. They thought they were going to a magnificent new future, and sure enough, one generation later, their kids are drinking too much and ODing in Oakland, California. It's fascinating. But so that wound, I think we have an obligation to discover it, uncover it, and discard it.
So is that the recipe to do it, is knowing?
Yeah, I think so. Investigate, put yourself in it.
So if you keep having outcomes that are the same, that aren't desirable, try to figure out what the cause is.
Figure out where it goes, where it came from. Yeah, I did this thing a little while ago called Operation Recovered Warrior. I spent 6 days with guys whose issue is warfare. Their commonality is they've been in battle together. Different ways, different styles, different ages, different generations, but they all come together and basically do Bible study and talk about this thing, the dance between good and evil, and the warrior and the warrior ethos, and the man who's willing to stand in the gap against Satan, basically, against the guy that created war, and what it does to you, how it can damage you, and how you get back to first principles, which is to be honorable and honest and true and brave and all the stuff that we think is important, or that we grow up thinking are the cliches that are important. They're not cliches, though. They're active choices that you can make. And I think that helps to diffuse a lot of the disenchantment we have from day to day. There's a great line in a book, Christian Science with Key to the Scriptures. Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. She talks about, do not grow weary in well-doing. Wait for your reward, for to that end God works with you. I get that. So you're not supposed to quit. Short and sweet.
And also, you're not supposed to do it for instant gratification. You're supposed to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, one of my favorite books here in the library is I have an inauguration version of Kennedy's Profiles in Courage.
Oh, really?
That they gave out, you know, and that he signed. And I think, courage and bravery and standing up for the thing that's right versus the thing that's popular. Or I think we experienced that during COVID too, like how quick everybody was like just a mess.
I felt it was a blessing actually that we homeschooled our kids. So we did it before the lockdown. And I thought, well, our life didn't really change that much. I mean, I went and shopped. And I got I have a buddy he comes from a long family of like sort of witch doctors, So he said, my grandmother's going to make you a mask. So she sent me a mask with a big buffalo on it. And I thought, yeah, I'll wear this, I didn't wear it for too long.
So kind of talking about time, one thing too that's interesting is the way you move around time does sort of have a hypnotic effect a little bit. I don't know if you kind of know what I mean, but like, like movies like Pulp Fiction or Fight Club, how they move time around.
Yeah, right.
And when you watch the movie, you have a hard time remembering.
Figuring where it was, yeah.
It has that a little bit.
The way I laid out the book, it just came to me the way. So that's how it ended up being written, because I had that compulsion to kind of keep explaining what I was doing at the same time. I was really quite happy about discovering that the time really had no value. My brain going from one place to the next didn't matter that it was separated by 60 years. Didn't matter that I was 7 when I realized that. It mattered that it connected all of a sudden in telling my sister's story. So,
yeah,
I had a great time writing it in a weird way. I mean, it was really hard and difficult and sad sometimes, but then to discover some of the things that I did, to remember some of the things I remembered was fantastic. Like when I realized my tree was gone out of the yard in New Jersey. That was a great moment, because I was just writing along, like just taking a walk, and I went, "Oh my God, my tree's not there," and that was fantastic. I hadn't even thought of it. So,
You talk about the criminal justice system and reform a little bit. Just what are your thoughts on that? Because you're coming from a perspective of a very personal experience,
Right.
and unless you've had the experience that you had, there's less value in your opinion if you haven't been affected. right? Like everybody
Right.
here in California is like super liberal and let it go until their house gets broken into.
Yeah, right. And
And
suddenly
then
it's like,
they flip.
how do we let this happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. The specifics of my experience since Karen's death, um, there were about 13 years there where there wasn't a peep, and then suddenly I get a call. It says, "Are you prepared to make a statement at Michael Corbett's hearing?" It was Michael Corbett the first time, and then Freddie Glenn the next time. I thought, what do you mean? What do you mean make a statement? Aren't they? Didn't they get life in prison? I said, yeah, but they qualify for parole now. So that was, and I forget which part of the Bill of Rights it is, but the cruel and unusual punishment part seemed to me that was being meted out upon the victim's family instead of the other way around. And as I've been more and more acquainted with it, there are any number of ways that you can angle for release. If you're a person who's been proven guilty of murder, and a horrible murder at that. So I think I've done 7 probation hearings or parole hearings, and then some for release into halfway houses, that kind of thing. There's a couple of other special programs that are designed. And I finally said to somebody at the Department of Corrections, I said, how is it that they've offered so many ways to like game the system, to figure out something? And she said, well, it's called the criminal justice system, not the victim's justice system. I thought, it's nice, ironic, simple way of looking at it. There's a lot of people making a lot of money working on making the criminal justice system work for criminals. I get it. And you know what? If someone could actually dedicate their lives to helping other people who'd done some bad things when they were young, I get it. The chief issue with the guy that killed my sister, Freddie, has always been his sort of the way he diminishes the crime. In his speeches, in his protestations, he's always said, I don't even remember raping her, stuff like that. I just think, at least own it. If you had the balls to own it, I might actually consider the idea that you should be free, but not that way. When I read the police report and put some parts of it into the book, the ammunition that it gave me was extraordinary, because the real statement about what happened that night came from one of the other guys. And Freddie said, the last words my sister ever heard were, tilt your head back. You can stay in jail.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, is that the idea of how that's connected to forgiveness is you can forgive, but I don't know. I personally in situations have always been okay with forgiving, but there's also just the fact that, the person is who they are, and it doesn't mean I'm going to do business with them again or it's like, I'm okay. Like
my forgiveness is something that
but there's
is like a God thing.
There's a price to pay for
it's given
your
to me
thing.
by that. Yeah. The bargain on this plane is, well, you took somebody's life. You thought you were entitled to take it. You stay where you are.
Yeah.
You gave that up in that moment. And it wasn't careless. Listen, I believe in accidental I think manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, stuff like that, there are extenuating circumstances that come along with that. But this was a conscious choice that, once again, to that statement, is that's what he wanted to do and gave it some thought. And there were 7 other people who died at the hands of these guys. They only tried for 3 cases because they thought, well, these 3 are a slam dunk. So I always felt bad for the 4 other families who lost their loved ones to these creeps, and they didn't even get any kind of justice.
This part here is beautiful, but the part that's highlighted.
Okay. I enjoyed many days, but there was always something holding me back. There is a book, Where Angels Fear to Tread, by E.M. Forster, one of my favorite writers. He describes the voice of an English tenor. Unable to soar as an Italian singer might, the English voice is lovely, but never fully given over to emotion. As if there is a frog in the throat holding it back, a bit of phlegm blocking it, choking it. Just a bit. It's like that all my life, since Karen died. like that. Yeah.
That is that is a beautiful piece of writing.
Thank you.
I mean, it really is beautiful.
Thank you. Oh, thanks.
That's just such a hard thing to explain, and the way you explain it, like you can feel like,
Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
Thanks. Thanks, man. Yeah. Thank you for that.
So I'm gonna switch it now to politics. But
Okay.
you wrote the powerful want us to hate one another. Why? Control. Again, it's always control. People divided against each other, people separated from God, are easy to manipulate and lead. Governments masquerade as God and try to convince us God has no place, no plan for us, nor does religion. They lie. And they promise prosperity, one group over another, one group against another. Into the cracks of these contentions, individuals fall, broken and lost, and they spiral out of control. And it goes back to the
That's what we're
agency.
saying. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah, and this whole thing, get up and go to work.
Focus on what you can control, add value,
Yeah.
and you're gonna figure it out. But if you focus on the things you can't control, you feel helpless and you're miserable.
That's where they want you. Somebody
I
comes
mean,
along.
the thing that fascinates me is that most of the time people have this learned helplessness and they externalize control, right? Because they don't think they can, or they don't think they're good enough, or they think if they tried it wouldn't work.
Right.
And so when they externalize control, any sort of full potential, and full potential isn't just, money or success, it's just happiness or authenticity, being a whole human that has a certain energy that makes people around you better, isn't on the table.
Yeah.
It doesn't even get a seat at the table. It's not thought about. It's not mentioned, because there's this conflict of helplessness of where you're, if I just won the lottery, or if the government just did this, or if I just had this leg up, or whatever it is.
I think, well, no, I know it's true. You can be a teacher, you can be a musician, you can be an unsuccessful musician. You can teach kids to sing and have the most rewarding life ever. It's got nothing to do with money. It's got nothing to do with the set of houses you got. But we are trained to think. Lately, we've been trained to think. Well, you know what? Honest, this has probably been going on for thousands of years. But the external appearances convince us that I'd rather be that guy than who I am, until you realize that, oh no, I can be charged by destiny. I can be a very happy guy who raises orchids, and maybe I'll make a living at it, but maybe I'll make just enough of a living to be able to eat and feed my children and feed them dreams to pin their hopes to, and be a decent human being. And I think that can happen anywhere. And the idea that the government's going to give it to you is crazy. Because the government's just, if you do well, the government's going to come and take it away from you. They have to. That's what they do. It's like the mafia. It just is like, we're going to come in and control your neighborhood. We're going to come in and you'll pay us protection money. We don't own any land anymore. We don't get to own our land. We pay real estate taxes on it, and when we don't pay them, they come and take it.
Yeah.
So it's a very funny game. But I'm for. I mean, look, I get governments need to exist and manage.
But they need to serve
things.
us.
Yeah,
they need, the police, the fire department.
Absolutely.
There needs to be a judicial system, but it's just overreach.
Fairness, yeah.
And because we've created this environment where people want that and they're looking for it, it becomes like, I like how you're saying it becomes the God in a way, right?
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely government, small g, definitely God. Yeah.
And we worship it in a sense when it's clerical.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be.
And it's even so subtle. Lately, I forget which president. Some president a few back said something like, "Well, we can't give you the American dream anymore." I thought, well, government's got nothing to do with that. But then I started to realize the subtle pitch was, we can't give you the American dream anymore, but what we can do is promise to make somebody else's dream a little smaller.
Yeah, we can socialize.
We're
it.
going to take this from them and say, see? Doesn't that make you feel better? And it doesn't, but it's a funny game.
I mean, another side of this, and I'm just curious if this resonates with you at all. But I've had some situations where I talk about my father not being in my life, and just how kids are better developed if they have both parents, and I lacked that. I didn't have. I mean, there are many situations where I wish I had a father to teach me how to tie a tie or shave, or just that example.
Yeah, right.
Like just an example, And people will say, "Oh, well, you turned out great and you're successful," and I'm like, well, most of my success, honestly, is running from being poor, and so I'm chasing riches and success, but I might have been happier as a high school football coach.
Yeah.
I might have been happier, doing something else than running from this empty hole that I'm trying to fill of how much money do you need? How successful do you have to be? And kind of to the point you were saying, do you ever feel that, like that you were running from something and trying to prove something to a thing that didn't matter in the
funny.
end?
It would have been, I was happy to be just a theater guy. I discovered acting, and I thought, boy, I love plays. I love Shakespeare. So I was doing that, and I was doing okay at it. I mean, I did some great. I did 9 or 10 of Shakespeare's plays, and so started in San Diego. I got my first job. I was living in New York, but my first job was the San Diego Shakespeare Festival. So I got my ass out there. I spent 3 years doing Shakespeare. It was fantastic. Got back to New York City. I came to LA one day, and I was on my motorcycle, and I drove into Los Angeles, and I could see the air. It was brown, and I could see it from about 20 miles outside of LA. And I said, I'm not moving here.
It's like iced tea.
I said, what the hell? I'm not coming here. So I went in and met some guys at the Mark Taper Theater. I did an open audition, because that's what you could do back then. There was a play there that they called and said, would you be interested in coming back and reading for this? And I thought, I saw that brown cloud. I said, no, thanks. I'm going to go back to New York. So I went back to New York. And the air was actually better in New York City back then, but I'm talking 76. Where was I going with this? Oh, I was content to just be an actor, but then I had a kid. I had a child, and I was doing theater. I was doing pretty good in theater. I did Cassio in Othello with James Earl Jones and Christopher Plummer. I did Stephen Sondheim musical, the original production of Sunday in the Park with George. Things were great, but then I had a kid, and I realized I was never going to make enough money to take care of her. I got to get a job, so I sat down in front of the television and I thought, I better figure out how to get a television job. And my buddy I was staying with at the time. My daughter was sitting in a drawer asleep. And he said, you're going to do a TV show, aren't you? I said, yeah, I think I have to. Sure enough, I got Cheers about 8 months later. But that was my life had to change for that. And I guess I just trusted it enough to know that something was going to change. And it's been okay. But it's hard, because there's always that knowing, like, oops, I ran out of money this month.
Yeah.
It's still going on,
It's a funny dance.
Yeah.
And a compromise, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So your favorite book is the Bible?
Yeah.
What did you think of the Dali Bibles?
Pretty cool. Pretty interesting.
Did you know those existed?
No, I didn't know.
So you know the story behind it?
No.
So this guy was very wealthy, came up with an idea of how to convert Dali. And so he thought if he commissioned him
right.
to
tell the story.
To tell the story of the Bible, there was no way he wouldn't convert and be saved. And it didn't work.
Interesting.
But we have,
Interesting stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Very abstract, but incredible.
Yeah. Fascinating.
He didn't convert.
Yeah, I get it.
What would be your top 5 books that you would recommend?
Well, I mentioned a word from it once. I loved Stranger in a Strange Land, Robert Heinlein. It was a very popular book. Leon Russell wrote a song about it. He's a stranger in a strange land. And David Crosby wrote a song about it, which is very funny because there was this thing in it. There was a thing called Water Brothers. 2 women, a man, 2 men, a woman, whatever. You were water brothers and you could make love, you could be together, whatever. And then, of course, David Crosby wrote a song about it. Sister lover, son, you must know about water brothers. Hand in hand, maybe lovers. And it was so David Crosby, but it was a wonderful song about a movement that actually this book really took off with people. I mean, I don't know if you know it, but Stranger in a Strange Land, it's fantastic. I've got a couple of copies in my collection back home. It was my favorite book back then. I didn't use the line in this book, but I've used it elsewhere. There's a character in it, he's a novelist, very successful. They meet this guy who's obviously a Christ figure. One thing he says, gratitude is another word for resentment. That just popped off the page at me, and I thought, that's very interesting. And I have seen true gratitude, and I live in a truly great place. But once you start giving people stuff and tell them to be grateful, they tell you they are, but they're always in the back of their mind going like, well, that guy, he makes a lot more money than that. Why didn't you just give me more? So it's a very quick trip from gratitude to resentment. And that was an amazing thing. So that's Stranger in a Strange Land. Moby Dick, one of my absolute favorite books. Very hard to get through because of the language and because the Isle of the Manhattoes. That's, one of the things he said, Manhattan. It's a look into a period of time previous to this, right? Which I love. And we have no knowledge of it. It was, the oil industry, but when oil was taken from whales. And of course it died, and all those people died, and all that culture died. And we go to Nantucket now and walk down a cobblestone street and, sort of get a sense of what the whaling industry must have been like. But, a lot of people lost their lives doing it. That's when people were working hard. But I love that book because of that sort of fight, the inner fight with the whale, with the animal in us, with hatred, and what Ahab does to himself and to his men, and how strong hate is.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah. And he who first spies the great white whale, to me, it's very romantic to me as well. I mean, my brain goes there. I learned to sail when I was young, so I always loved the ocean and that idea of sailing. Another book that I love is E.M. Forster's Passage to India. They made a pretty great movie about it, but my favorite thing about the book is how these two cultures are meant to never really mix, the Brits and the Indians. Dr. Aziz takes this woman to what they call the Marabar Caves, and the phenomenon of the Marabar Caves is for some reason they're polished on the inside. You get inside and you're dark, so what happens is you light a match, and the match is reflected in the cave wall. But as you approach, the two flames basically kiss and then die. And I thought, boy, that's a great metaphor for they can never touch. They can never really touch. These cultures will cancel each other. And that's kind of, I guess, what happened with the British colonial movement.
Yeah.
But it was such an insightful book. E.M. Forster, and the same one that wrote Where Angels Fear to Tread, he just had some insights about things and culture. Because in Angels Fear to Tread, this English family goes to rescue a baby who is the product of a love connection in Italy. And one of the daughters who escaped from home basically ended up marrying a guy in Italy and had a baby, but she died in childbirth. So they think they're going to go home and they're going to go get the baby. And of course, the baby's fine. They're messed up. And it doesn't go well, but it's a hell of a book. I'd love to make a movie out of it. I used to like science fiction quite a bit. There's a Stranger in a Strange Land is basically science fiction. Dune, when Frank Herbert won everything, won everything. I think that was 75 or 6. I think maybe 76. Maybe came out in 75. But wow, that was just what an adventure. The Kwisatz Haderach and all that stuff, all the stuff that happened. It was just so cool. And the first movie they made of it, Sting was in the very first movie of it. And Charlie Durning was an old pal of mine. He played Santa Claus in a movie I did years later. He's the most lovely man, but he was awful in Dune. I mean, honestly, it was unforgivable. And I think I told him, I said, what the hell were you thinking, Adam? Oh my God. But so the new Dune that was made, I don't know if you saw it, wow, it kicked ass. Somebody loved the book like I did. I mean, I could just tell. You could smell the love on the production. It was just great, and they did such a nice job. It was really rewarding to see that come to life in that way, because it was not rewarding previously.
Who did the first one? Was it David Chase?
It was
David
David
Lynch.
Lynch. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Well, he probably doesn't walk around saying much about it. Probably not just, the feather in his hat. Well, the Bible, just because I read it all the time. I read it for just inside input. I use it a bit like a channeling thing that I'm not supposed to do that. I've been told, but I'll often sit with a Bible and I'll just pray for a second on what I think I need some information about, and I'll open the book randomly and just put my finger somewhere and then open my eyes, and it's exceptional the amount of times I'll just land on what I need to hear. But it's probably just because it's that good a book. On every page,
There's a lot of
probably
dimensions.
something you can hear. That whole idea of be not afraid 365 times in the Bible is okay. Well, that's pretty much daily advice. That's good advice. One of the joking things I had was one time I was in Buffalo, New York, and I was getting a little bit sort of foolhardy about the things I was thinking about. I was getting a little dark, and I thought, you know what? I wonder how old I'm going to be when I die. So I did my little thing with the Bible, and I took the Gideon's Bible out of the little hotel room I was staying in, and I did my thing, and I opened it up, and I put my finger on the verse, opened my eyes, and when he died, he was an old man and full of days.
Wow.
And I thought, boy, pretty tricky, pretty sneaky. And that was from Job. And I never forgot it, because it was a direct response that came out of that, but it wasn't specific. But it's the most beautiful expression of a good life to me. An old man and full of days. That's okay. That's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, because you wanted a number.
Yeah, I was looking for 147 or whatever. Yeah, it was very cool. So that there's some power out there. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But
Okay, top 3 vinyl albums. Like, if you had one evening and you were going to listen to 3 albums, what would they be?
well, one of them is Leonard Bernstein conducts Copeland. That's amazing. What a performance. Bernstein's conducting of Appalachian Spring is it's so thoughtful and rich. The New York strings, the New York Philharmonic strings are known as being a little strident. I think that was actually Bernstein that did that. They're not so strident as they used to be. There's just that upper level, that pitch. Just breathtaking. And then I was very lucky at one point. Aaron Copland came and spoke at our school. So I had pretty good schools. And he finally said Leonard Bernstein saw things in his music he didn't know were in it. He'd written it, but Bernstein found it. And that's higher praise than that I can't imagine. In the rock and roll world, a whole bunch of stuff I really used to love. I liked the first Crosby, Stills and Nash album. I thought that was pretty. Were they Wooden Ships? Was that what they called that? I don't know. I don't remember if that was what it was called. The first Mamas and Papas album was fantastic. Complete shocker. I write about that in this book. Cat Stevens' first album, Tea for the Tiller Man. I listened to some very weird music when I was younger.
I think we all did.
Yeah. There was a band called Rare Bird that was just ridiculous, awful stuff. But the Moog synthesizer, I liked a lot of the stuff that Yes did. I've been working on a piece about Chagall with John Anderson lately, which is pretty amazing, because that guy I think he's 78 now. He still sings like that guy. I see the roundabout. He's amazing. It's like he's a boy soprano still. Led Zeppelin.
Which one?
I don't know the name of the album. The one with Stairway to Heaven on it.
Is that 4?
But, I'm trying to think.
2?
Yeah. The Who Live at Leeds. I used to think that was a great album. Hendrix So the first Seals and Crofts album was great. Not the one with Summer Breeze on it. It was a Year of Sundays. Maybe it's Year of Sundays. Maybe it was before that. But when they were doing that thing about the Baha'i faith, and there was a lot of that in their music, that I loved that. It was wonderful. And there was one song that had a phrase in it that said, "This is it. Get off your knees. Look what your hands have wrought." I always loved that. So that's it. That's about where I am. I mean, Nat King Cole. Those are some of my favorite songs, favorite albums.
I think there's a vinyl Nat at Carnegie Hall.
Oh, man,
it's pretty great.
Yeah, there's a Frank Sinatra with Count Basie. That's a great album. People, I mean, I've met other people who say that's a great album. Getz and Gilberto, Stan Getz. That album's amazing.
What about Miles Davis?
I never listened to Miles that much.
No?
No, it's so fun. It kind of fell in that gap for me because when I was a kid riding around listening to Leon Russell, which I love, Shelter People, Stranger in a Strange Land, Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs and Englishmen. I loved all those albums. But I went to school in New York after that and I started driving in a car. I didn't have enough money for stereo. So I missed jazz. I didn't kind of really get into jazz until a little bit later. And I did like the blues, T-Bone Walker, Joe Turner. I liked them. I didn't really listen to John Mayall. I would listen to some of the older black guys from, the 20s and stuff that just had a tradition that was just beautiful to listen to. But so I missed Miles Davis, but then I ended up becoming friends with a guy that played saxophone with him named Tio Macera. And he did a whole bunch of stuff that ended up being Chuck Mangione and Return to Forever, Romantic Warrior. There was, forgetting the guy's name right now, but that was one of my favorite albums. And JT, James Taylor. We're going to go see James Taylor this weekend. Our son James is named after him.
Oh, wow.
The album Gorilla, that was the one that played.
You wore the grooves out.
Yeah.
So when you get your system, Miles Davis, Kinda Blue.
Okay.
Coltrane's on there.
Okay.
Him and Coltrane playing off of each other is a spiritual.
Fantastic.
If you just put that in the bass and I think it's Bill Evans on piano, it's nuts. There's something about that album that
I did love the
go
Blind
somewhere
Faith
else.
album. I remember you just made me think of something. The way Ginger Baker and Eric were playing together on Had to Cry Today.
Oh, Ginger was so good.
Oh, I never heard anything like it. It's like he's finishing musical phrases with the drums.
Keith Moon was in that. He was a cousin to that
range, yeah.
But Ginger did it in a way that nobody's done before.
This is good. I'm
a drummer. I was a drummer.
While, really.
Yeah, so that's what I hear first.
Not Buddy Martha. I saw Buddy Rich play once years ago. He just toured with a big band. I was in Buffalo, New York, same time. And he just did a bunch of standards. They were band was fantastic, sounded great. Then he did this one thing. He's just pounding away, just backing up his band most of the time. Then he did his drum solo toward the end of the evening, about 12 to 15 minutes. And he's pounding on the drums. It's all vertical, just you're just seeing vertical. And then he stands up and he does this thing where he starts to just send like horizontal, just skids off of the cymbals. And it looked like Japanese water painting. It was just, I'd never seen anything as beautiful in my life. And the delicacy that he hit with, and of course he was, considered a machine. But so we've had some good music days.
Yeah, it's incredible. The thing about Karen that I think makes it so unique and beautiful is the vulnerability, but also the idea that you weren't writing this for a word count or any sort of structure. It's just a piece of art. Is what it is.
Thank you.
It really is a piece of art, and most books don't do that.
Thank you very much.
Most books are in a structure and in a system, and
I appreciate the kind words. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
But you understand what I mean, right?
I really do. The publisher kept pointing me toward that other kind of book. I kept saying, no, you can't.
It wouldn't
do that.
work.
No, it just wouldn't. This
is a piece of art.
This is a relationship between me and the reader.
Yeah. And I think well beyond your time, people are going to use this as inspiration.
I hope so. Thank you.
For many reasons. but it is beautiful, and we thank you
Thanks.
for doing it. Will you sign this for
I
me?
sure will. Thank you.
No, thank you.
All right. It's Chris, right?
Yeah, CHRS.
Okay.
Please don't do a K.
No, I know. It's like, oh, that's one of my favorite
People
stories.
do that
It's
sometimes.
Like, it's
People text me
And,
KRI. I'm like, what? Do you want a coffee for the road?
no, I'm okay. Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's too late for a coffee now. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, sir.
Very kind of you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I really appreciate the effort. Thank you.
Oh, I mean, I love work that, that there's just a lot of soul in, and you can tell somebody.